Hello, everyone. My name is Nipul Chokshi. Welcome to our webinar today, Winning B2B Sales in 2021. We are really excited that you can join us today. Before we get started, a couple of technical housekeeping items. We are taking Q&A throughout the entire webinar. If you have any questions, please enter them using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Also, just as a reminder, this webinar will be recorded. So if you'd like to review portions of it afterwards, we'll be making that available on Bright Talk as well. I'm really excited to have our guest speaker today, Shea from Forrester, who will be speaking to various insights and frameworks around how we can drive more effective sales in kind of the new normal, as it were. But before I turn it over to Mary, what I want to do is just kind of cover a little bit of context. At the end of the day, we've seen a significant transformation in terms of how digital tactics play from a buyer engagement standpoint in terms of our go-to-market strategies. This is a great quote that the CEO of Microsoft had a few months back, it's as all of us as B2B sales and marketing professionals, we always knew that digital transformation was something that was in store for each and every one of us. It's just that the urgency and the importance of achieving that digital transformation has just accelerated as a result. And obviously that's had an impact in terms of how we execute from a sales standpoint. And so what I want to do today is turn it over to Mary, who'll just kind of walk you through some insights and some of Forrester's research around how sales can think differently to be able to engage more effectively with buyers in this new normal, as it were. Mary?
Great, thank you so much. It's great to be here, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Wonderful context setting, and let's just start off by thinking about 2020. When we go back and we think about 2020, I think we'll think lots of things, but as it relates to sales, marketing, and buying in the B2B realm, I think we're going to understand that the dynamics have changed forever. And so we can kind of see this here in some of the visuals that I'm sharing with you. This is one of our Forrester sales reps, Leah Arnold, and I think she does a wonderful job. She's pivoted very quickly and embraced video. We're seeing that video-based interactions in this type of environment are really resonating with buyers. When you think about it, human beings actually process visual-based images 60,000 times faster than text. So here's just an example of a rep who sort of took the creativity on her own and created virtual coffees with practitioners, thought leaders, analysts at Forrester to really help build her brand, increase the size of her network, and continue to engage in meaningful ways with her territory and folks in that territory. We can move forward, Nipul. So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about as it relates to the current environment is the opportunity for transformation and innovation. And obviously we're in a troubling time from a health and economic perspective and the global implications therein. But when you think about where we're at, I think we're going to see tremendous innovation happening in both the B2B and B2C worlds. If you think about the Dixie Cup as an example, back in 1907, the Dixie Cup was actually invented, and it didn't take off commercially until 1918, 1919, when the last global pandemic was in process. And people needed the ability to consume liquids outside of their home in a safe and sanitary way. The last global economic downturn in 2008, 2009, we saw the birth of the gig economy, as visualized here with Uber and Airbnb. So for this particular period of hardship, I think we will see tremendous transformation in the B2C realm, but in B2B, I think we'll see new business models, new selling strategies, new selling models, and many changes that will last for a long time post this pandemic. One of the things I think my research has showed me, both in terms of the survey research and the qualitative research that I do on an ongoing basis, as well as the conversations I have with our clients, is that buyers have been really changing their preferences. They've been evolving for quite some time. And for those of you who are Forrester clients, I'm sure you're very familiar with this, the concept of the consumerization of the business buyer. My colleague Steve Casey has written a lot about that concept. But what's really interesting is I tried to delve deeper into some of the challenges that were in play before COVID awareness and in play now, and as we became aware of the pandemic. Many of the challenges that selling organizations are facing are really relating to trends that have been in progress for some time around how buyers want to engage and interact. And so this is a survey that I conducted this summer with business leaders, primarily B2B sales leaders, and I wanted to get to the heart of how they felt their go-to-market strategy was going to be changed as a result of some of the challenges and trends that were out there in the marketplace. Not surprising, just under 20%, the top trend is we're going to change, or the economic environment is clearly going to impact and influence our go-to-market strategy. We've seen this already, as about 38% of businesses are saying cost reduction is their second top most important initiative after growth, and 41% of businesses have already reduced the size of their sales force. So clearly that's an important issue that was driven by the pandemic. But if you look at all these other ones below, most of these issues really revolve around changing buyer preferences and the desire to create and drive a more buyer-centric experience as part of the sales engagement process. So I think we've been talking about this for a while, but now business leaders are now really thinking about how to change and impact their go-to-market strategies as a result of changing preferences, the increasing utilization of multiple channels, an omni-channel approach, digitally self-aware and self-directed buyers, and so on. So all of these changing preferences really are colliding and being accelerated by COVID. So for the sellers that are on the phone here today, or on the webinar here today, and the business leaders, one of the things that is going to happen is that the sellers are going to have to quickly adapt, and many have already. Leah Arnold is a really great example of that at Forrester. I'm sure you have many leaders at your own organizations, but sellers are going to need to adapt, and organizations are going to need to reskill and upskill their sellers so that they can succeed in what we believe at Forrester to be an increasingly remote and digital environment. So I predicted that even in a post-pandemic world, we're going to see 80% of B2B sales done in a remote and digital capacity. So as a result of this, here are the ways that sellers need to really think about changing how they interact in the marketplace. So buying or creating and actually sharing videos, I think, will be one of the top ways that sellers share content, and one of the top ways that buyers actually consume it and get value from content. We're seeing a world where as buy-side teams increase in size and complexity and expertise, so are sell-side teams. So the days of the lone wolf seller are kind of behind us. We're seeing the importance of data in the sales cycle and the entire customer life cycle continue to be more and more important. And here, I'm not saying that sellers need to be data scientists, but they really need to understand and have the right data available, be able to understand how to ask the right questions and how to utilize that data to deliver increasingly more personalized interactions for their customers and prospects. And I won't go through all of these. LinkedIn highlighted the ability for sellers to engage in active listening as the #1 attribute that buyers appreciated. And then clearly, having the ability to engage really effectively in an omni-channel manner will be important as we move forward. So let's move forward, Nipul. I want to double click into the details here a little bit more. And as you see here, we've got an amalgamation of traditional attributes that I might have hired, 7 years ago, 8 years ago when I was the head of sales. I might have hired for these attributes. Maybe some of you have hired for these attributes. And we see sort of a little bit more of a look down the path to what that seller of the future is going to look like. But these are typically, the first two, I would say, pretty traditional attributes. Problem solving, a good communicator. I'm not sure that I would rate those as highly as our business leaders did. Embracing collaboration, I'm really happy to see that rise to the top three. Competitive nature, certainly that's important, but I think engaging with empathy is much more important. And imagine the ability to have an optimistic mindset where you can shape a shared vision of what the benefit of your solution or product is going to provide to your prospects and customers in a highly difficult environment that we have today. The ability to turn your back on negative or difficult interactions and be emotionally agile. I think these kinds of softer attributes are going to continue to be more and more important as we move into the future from a sales perspective. So I want to talk a little bit about some of these COVID accelerated trends. And if we can move to the next slide, Nipul, that would be great. So I want to talk about some of the trends that have been in progress but have been accelerated by COVID. Going back to the quote that Nipul shared at the beginning of the call, that 2 years of digital sales transformation has taken place in 2 months. I couldn't agree with that more. But some of these trends were well in play many years ago. The on-site sales meeting, as an example, has been on a downward trajectory since 2017, when we found out that 1 in 7 business buyers actually preferred not to meet on-site in person. So we really see at Forrester those days of the traditional sales approaches where, role warriors are pitching in boardrooms, schmoozing over meals, walking the halls at client headquarters are pretty much a thing of the past. And I'm not saying that those techniques and methods aren't useful in this environment, but they're going to have to transition to a different format. So imagine that you can't go visit 5, 7, 8 folks at a corporate headquarters. You certainly can do that in a remote digital environment, whether that's over social connections or social interactions, or in a remote or screen sharing type of environment like we're having today. Let's move on to the next trend. We've also been seeing this happen for some time, and the reality is your buyers don't care how you're organized, what you call your sellers, whether they're inside, they're remote, they're field, they're outside. They just want to engage and interact in a fluid and seamless way, and they expect every persona that they interact with on the supplier side to understand what that last connection and interaction point was, and to have continuity across the entire sales cycle. So I think over time, we're going to see less and less sort of differentiation around sellers from an analog and digital capacity, like inside, outside, SDRs, BDRs, and start to see organizations align sellers that can deliver on the experience that buyers want, or that have an area of sub-specialization around the buy cycle. So more to come on that as we move forward. I think we're all really familiar with the proliferation of SaaS, or as we call it at Forrester, as a service business model, extending outside the pure technology realm. And with that, buyers are really expecting a different type of experience. They're expecting continuous and added value across the entire customer lifecycle. Not that one-time spike before you close the deal, where the entire team from sales engineer to CEO reaches out and tries to drive the deal across the line, or that same kind of interaction 90 days before the renewal's up. But increasingly, buyers are expecting continuous consultative exponential value at every touch point. And the visuals here show this. On the right-hand side, your Budweiser sales rep who is dropping off beer on a route to your on-premises business owners isn't really selling beer anymore. That individual is selling deep, rich insights around point-of-sale data that they're acquiring from the system, and integrating with third-party data like Nielsen and other to provide that operator with the consultative advice they need to drive margins on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. At a time like this, that type of guidance and insights could not even be more valuable. And, going back to Microsoft, they're not selling software solutions or point solutions to particular business problems. They're transforming the way teams work and collaborate. So it's a really different world that I think has been accelerated by the proliferation of as a service business model that we're all used to. The other thing that my research is showing is that, and again, I think this is an offshoot of the as a service model, is that, sort of this traditional hierarchy of sellers is starting to shift a little bit. The sellers that were at the top of the pyramid in the past were the ones that opened the door, overcame objections, closed the deal. Today, we're looking at someone who could be a concierge of advice and guidance and content, who can really be a coach and help that organization understand how to work with their company and how to buy in an effective manner. So we're starting to see more and more focus on the post-sale personnel as they can impact growth opportunities because they're deeply embedded into their customers' businesses, and how they can really drive commercial opportunities and customer satisfaction. So stay tuned for more exciting developments there. But as we see the revenue team extend across the entire customer lifecycle, we're seeing organizations think about arming those personas, those users, with the right tools, data, and other types of services that will help them engage more effectively across the lifecycle. And this is really just kind of an extension of what I described, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that we're seeing buy-side teams increase in size, dynamics, expertise. No one wants to be on the hook for a wrong decision today. We have millennials that are prone to more of a consensus building type of decision cycle. We have folks that have different and competing agendas. So, and we also have CFOs who are pretty much inserting themselves into every deal now, as well as procurement that's taking on a pretty front forward role in trying to negotiate deal terms and better terms for their organization. As these buy-side teams increase, we're seeing revenue teams increase and much more focused on collaborative selling and collaborative tooling of every individual who is going to touch a customer or prospect at some point in the customer lifecycle. So let's now turn to what it's going to take to be successful, and then I'll turn the discussion over to Nipul, who'll share some case studies and some other insights with the group. But let's talk about some pragmatic ways to think about how to succeed in a COVID and beyond world. I get asked this question all the time for our customers. When is this going to end? When are we going back to normal? I think at this point, in terms of the maturity of where we are with the pandemic, many organizations are realizing that there isn't a return to what was, but that we're collectively carving out the vision of a new future. And we did some research this summer, our employee experience survey, where we went out globally and surveyed about 500 white-collar workers and got some insights around what they thought about work from home or work from anywhere. And what we saw, and we'll go into a little bit more detail, is that 53% of workers who are currently remote at that time hope they'd be able to work from home even after the crisis is over. So I'm not going to go into everything on the right side of this, but I think this sort of speaks to the trends from carbon neutrality to carbon negativity to what's happening with the airline industry, with the reduction of routes, the reduction of the size of their employee forces, and a number of other things that help me as an analyst sort of come to that prediction that 80% of sales will be done in a remote digital capacity. Many of these items, plus healthcare protocols, will make it impractical for sellers to go on site unless it's a pretty unique circumstance. I think you can also think many times that we've seen over the last year or 2 years where selling teams have gone on site only to have half of the evaluation team dial in from phone number or from WebEx because they were in a different location. So we're going to see a big impact on this work from home on how organizations buy and sell. And I think the next slide really just kind of goes into a little bit more, oops, you can go to the next one. details around what customers are thinking about in terms of how they're making their investments with AI and automation. So this was from our survey in the summer as well, and we saw that about 57% of business leaders plan to make deeper investments in AI and automation. And as you all know, the deeper and cleaner the data set is, the better the organization has to drive pretty significant insights at the rep, manager, and business leader level. So as you think about your planning for 2021, start to think about how you want to experiment and prioritize solutions that bring embedded AI and automation to the revenue teams that you support. So again, as you think about a different landscape, and Nipul, feel free to just build these out there on animation. I think there's a couple pieces of advice that I'd really love to give everyone. First is, think of this as a watershed moment. This is a transformational moment where you really have the opportunity to be creative, to start to experiment with new ways of organizing your revenue teams, new ways of tooling and enabling them with what they need in order to be successful in their engagements. Make some experiments. Think of different ways of doing things and setting up your organizational structures that have more of a buyer-centric versus supplier-centric modality. I think we're starting to see agile business planning. There's another quote that I think the CEO of Microsoft said early into the pandemic was that every business needs to be prepared to remote everything. And I think it's even bigger than remote. I think it's about agile, having the ability to pivot with new information, whether that's really understanding how to change your targeting strategy as a result of who's doing well or who's struggling in the pandemic, and starting to be able to do that with the right data and insights on a moment's notice. I think we've talked about some of these other things. I think the other thing is that as we go more remote, organizations can start to be more creative with talent acquisition, where you don't necessarily have to hire someone that is dialed into your headquarters, but you can start to acquire top-tier talent who live in a range of places all over the world. So those are a couple of pieces of advice I'd give you. Happy to continue the discussion on social or through any other medium, as I think these topics are so important right now. And at this point, I'll pass the leadership of the discussion over to Nipul.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. Those were some great insights indeed. And your observations around, kind of buyer expectations changing in the face of, our current events. That's something that we've certainly seen across our customer base. Our customer base specifically, what they found is leveraging AI and data have been really impactful when it comes to empowering sellers to be a lot more effective when it comes to engaging with their buyers. And you can see some of the business results that they've been able to achieve as a result. And so what I want to do now is just kind of double click on some of the insights that Mary provided and give you some practical examples of what we've seen some of our customers do to adapt to some of the changes that Mary had talked about in the buying environment. And there's specifically four examples that I want to walk you through. The first example is really as a seller, one of the kind of golden nuggets, if you will, is to really make sure that you're engaging with buyers as early on in the buying cycle as possible, as well as to be able to tap into any sort of hidden demand that might exist for your solution. And so what we're finding is a lot of our customers are leveraging third-party intent signals to be able to highlight for their sellers which buyers are in market, so that you can assess and prioritize their focus from a prospecting standpoint on those very accounts. And the idea here is that third-party intent signals, what they're doing is they're really capturing whether prospects are searching on specific keywords and topics related to concepts that your solution might be, that indicate interest and indicate need related to the solution that you're actually selling. And what our customers will do is merge those intent signals and overlay them on top of fit signals. So as a sales rep, if you're putting together a prospecting list, what a lot of our customers are doing is not just identifying which customers kind of fit the ICP in terms of firmographics, in terms of things like industry, company size, location, maybe if you're using account scoring, leveraging those signals. But then on top of that, they're also overlaying, these interest signals that give them a sense of who's actually actively starting a buying cycle within their patch, as well as how far down the buying cycle they actually are. So this is something that we've seen a lot of customers find really powerful when it comes to empowering sales teams to be able to prioritize their focus. Another example is, as a sales rep, you're always trying to figure out who's most likely to spend, and you want to make sure that you're always focused on companies that are most likely to spend. And so especially given kind of the current circumstances with COVID, if you're selling into various industries or verticals, a lot of businesses have been impacted by COVID, and so as a result, their likelihood to spend is a lot lower than normal, right? And so as a seller, what our customers are doing is not just looking at things like specific industries, right? When COVID first started, immediately a lot of sellers said, okay, I'm probably going to take out a lot of the travel players, companies in the travel industry. If they're in my pipeline, I'm probably going to, they're not going to progress down my pipeline. So I'm probably going to take them out of my forecast. And so what they're doing is adding another level of precision to be able to really understand at a company level what kind of financial impact their target buyers are facing. What's the impact based on the location of that company? What's the impact based on the supply chain that they're interacting with? Perhaps they have distributors or manufacturers that have been impacted by COVID, and as a result, that might impact their buyer's business as well. So the idea here is being able to leverage something like a COVID impact score that we offer as part of our Hoovers offering, to be able to really identify which buyers are most likely to spend based on the level of risk that their buyers are presenting. That goes a long way towards, again, helping sales reps figure out where should they actually spend their time. The third example is, just kind of finding the right buyers, finding the right contacts at the right decision-making entities within a particular account. If you're a seller selling into large companies, in this example, it's just, let's say, Amazon, right? If you're selling solutions that are really targeted towards, cloud software providers, you're not just going to look for any contact at Amazon. You're going to want to make sure that that contact actually works for Amazon Web Services, which is a very specific subsidiary of that company. And so being able to identify kind of the right location, the right subsidiary goes a long way towards, again, helping reps identify the right buyers. So again, they're able to, in these times, be able to focus their efforts, in a more precise way. What a lot of our customers are also doing is, as part of, one of the benefits that D&B offers is there's an AI capability where we use AI to be able to look at, thousands of different signals to assess whether a particular entity, buying entity, is actually a decision-making headquarters, is actually a decision-making entity. And so just kind of being able to flag that, our customers are able to say, okay, this is the right location that I need to engage with, and so I need to find the right contacts there to be able to prospect into. Especially applicable as you're selling, going through an enterprise motion, selling to really larger companies. And then the last example here that I'll just leave you with is just engaging with context. To Mary's point earlier, as buyer expectations have shifted, as the noise increases when it comes to any sort of digital interactions, the brands that stand out are the ones that are going to be engaging with a lot more relevance, that are going to be engaging and presenting insights to buyers that your competitors aren't necessarily presenting. And so it's really critical to make sure that your reps have that 360-degree view of each and every one of the accounts that they're about to call into, right? So, a lot of our customers, what they'll do is they'll make sure that the reps for each account that's a part of their patch, they're able to monitor, ongoing changes within each and every one of their accounts. So there's alerts anytime there's a new executive that gets hired at a particular company or whatnot, or if a company opens up a new office, right? There's additional insights that they provide with their reps in terms of, perhaps what kind of technologies they might have, behind the firewall that they're actually using, and so on and so forth. So having that context at your fingertips as a sales rep, rather than having to, kind of go to 50 different places to kind of put together that 360 view of the customer, is absolutely critical. And our customers have found that particularly effective when it comes to engaging and driving their deal cycles with their prospects. This is just another example. A lot of our customers, what they're doing is leveraging a new, kind of offering that we have called Email IQ, that offers up, right within, the inbox. So as you're engaging with prospects, as you're about to send out that prospecting email, all the relevant insights associated with that contact and the account that the contact works with, right next to the email, right? It automatically kind of shows you things like the number of employees, other employees with similar titles at the company, and so on and so forth, right? So again, great example of how you can empower your reps with insights and contacts so that they can actually have more effective and productive conversations with prospects. And so there you have it. Those are just really quick, 4 examples of how, our customers are leveraging data, AI, and insights about accounts and contacts and prospects in order to drive more effective prospecting strategies. And so with that, I see a lot of questions coming in. So let's head into the Q&A portion of this.